Journalist Carl Hoffman did what the authorities refused to do. That investigator didn't find Michael, but he found something else. He traded a boat engine for 3 human skulls. The locals told him, "These are the white men we killed." The investigator asked, "Is one of them the famous one, the Rockefeller?" The answer was a silent nod. On November 19, 1961, the most powerful name in America met the oldest law of humanity. Michael Rockefeller had millions in the bank, 3 generations of Harvard behind him, and the entire U.S. government at his disposal. But as he collapsed onto the mud-slick shores of New Guinea, his throat scorched by salt after 24 hours in shark-infested waters, none of that existed anymore. To the men watching him from the jungle, he wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't a celebrity. He was a debt of blood, owed by the white man for a massacre they had never forgotten. Everyone asks, where did he go? Wrong question. The real question is, why did he pay for a crime he didn't commit? This isn't just a disappearance. It's a butterfly effect. A single colonial gunshot fired 3 years earlier, and the heir to the most powerful dynasty in America ends up devoured in a cannibalistic ritual. Settle in. This is the Rockefeller blood debt. To understand the end, you have to understand the height from which Michael fell. In 1961, the name Rockefeller was synonymous with absolute power. Michael's father, Nelson Rockefeller, was the governor of New York and on his way to becoming the vice president of the United States. His great-grandfather was John D. Rockefeller, the man who practically invented the American oil industry and became the wealthiest human being in modern history. Michael was born into a world of marble hallways, private jets, and limitless security. But Michael was different. He didn't want the boardrooms. He was quiet, artistic, and deeply enamored with what the West then called primitive art. In 1957, his father inaugurated the Museum of Primitive Art in New York. While other kids his age were obsessed with the space race, Michael was staring at Aztec masks and Mayan sculptures. He didn't just want to look at them, he wanted to find the source. He wanted to go where the world was still raw. He chose Dutch New Guinea, specifically the Asmat region, a place so remote and dense that the maps of the time were nothing but white spaces labeled unexplored. When Michael arrived, he saw the Asmat as artists. He saw their intricate wood carvings, the bish poles, as masterpieces for his father's museum. But Michael's first mistake was a lack of cultural translation. To the Asmat, those carvings weren't art. They were spiritual vessels. The Asmat lived in a world of perfect, terrifying balance. They believed that no death was ever natural. If a man died of disease, a spirit caused it. If a man was killed in battle, the balance was broken. To reset the world, to bring peace back to the village, that death had to be paid for. They practiced headhunting and ritual cannibalism, not out of hunger, but out of cosmic necessity. To take a head was to take a name. To eat the flesh was to absorb the power and reset the spiritual ledger. For centuries, this cycle stayed between tribes. But in the 1950s, a new tribe arrived. A tribe with white skin carrying sticks that spat fire, who understood nothing about the rules of the balance. Here is the secret the history books hide. 3 years before Michael set foot on the island, the village of Ochinep was involved in a local war with a neighboring tribe. The Dutch colonial government, desperate to prove to the UN that they could civilize the island, sent a patrol led by an officer named Max Lepre. Lepre wasn't interested in tribal nuances. He wanted order. When his patrol arrived at Ochinep, the warriors, as was their custom, began a ritual display of strength. They chanted. They brandished spears. They didn't know that to a nervous Dutchman with a rifle, this looked like an ambush. Lepre gave the order. In seconds, 5 of the most influential leaders of Ochinep were gunned down. They died in the mud, their blood mixing with the swamp water. The Dutch left, thinking they had taught them a lesson. But in the village, the world had stopped. 5 massive spirits were now wandering the jungle, crying out for vengeance. The balance was broken. And the Asmat were waiting. They weren't waiting for a soldier. They were waiting for a white spirit, of equal status to pay the debt. Flash forward to November 17th, 1961. Michael is on a 40-foot dugout canoe. With him is René Vossing, a Dutch anthropologist, and 2 local guides. They are heavily loaded with goods, knives, tobacco, cloth, to trade for art. Then, the ocean turned. A sudden squall hit the Arafura Sea. The waves became walls of gray water. The engine stalled, then flooded. The boat, top-heavy and narrow, capsized. The 2 local guides didn't hesitate. They jumped into the water and swam for the coast to get help. Michael and René were left alone, clinging to the overturned hull. They drifted for a full day, then another night. By the morning of the 19th, they were nearly 12 miles from shore. Michael looked at the horizon. He was 23 years old. He was a Rockefeller. He had been told his whole life he could conquer anything. He turned to René and said, "I think I can make it." He stripped to his underwear. He tied 2 empty gas cans to his waist as buoys. He stepped off the hull and began to swim. 12 hours after Michael swam away, René Vossing was spotted by a search plane and rescued. When the news reached New York, the world stopped. This wasn't just a search. It was a small-scale invasion. Nelson Rockefeller spared no expense. He flew to the island himself. He brought in the Dutch Navy, the Australian Air Force, and hundreds of local scouts. For 2 weeks, the jungle screamed with the sound of helicopters, machines the locals had never seen. The search parties did something absurdly Western. They marched through the jungle, screaming Michael's name at the top of their lungs. But the jungle is a wall of sound, and the people in the villages, they didn't answer. They watched the helicopters from under the canopy, clutching their spears, silent. After 10 days, the Dutch Minister of the Interior made the official announcement. There is no longer any hope of finding Michael Rockefeller alive. The official cause? Drowning and exhaustion. The Rockefellers went home. The world moved on. But on the island, the story was just beginning. For 50 years, the drowning theory was the only one allowed in polite society. But in 2014, journalist Carl Hoffman did what the authorities refused to do. He went back. He lived with the Asmat. He learned their language. He discovered that the mystery wasn't a mystery at all. It was an open secret. He found that shortly after the disappearance, a private investigator hired by the family had visited the island. That investigator didn't find Michael, but he found something else. He traded a boat engine for 3 human skulls. The locals told him, "These are the white men we killed." The investigator asked, "Is one of them the famous one, the Rockefeller?" The answer was a silent nod. When the investigator returned to the U.S., he gave his report to the family. Shortly after, a check for $250,000, the exact amount of the reward, was issued to him. The family stopped asking questions. They had their answer. It was just too gruesome to share with the world. Before we dive into the final mystery of this mountain, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask for your support. I'm currently building this community so we can explore these deep human stories and dark mysteries together. By subscribing, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of this journey. Let's build this together. Let's reconstruct what actually happened on that beach, according to testimonies gathered by Hoffman from the elders who were there. Michael Rockefeller actually made the swim. He was a trained athlete, and the current had pushed him toward the shore near, you guessed it, the village of Oostgeneep. He crawled out of the water, half dead, sun-scorched, and covered in salt. He was at his weakest. A group of 50 warriors from Oostgeneep were on their canoes when they saw him. Initially, they were terrified. They thought he was a sea monster or a Tuwan, a white ghost. But then, a leader named Ajim recognized the opportunity. He looked at this exhausted white man and remembered the 1957 massacre. He remembered the 5 leaders killed by the Dutch. He told the others, "Don't be afraid. He is just a man, and he is ours." They didn't kill him out of hate. They killed him because the ledger required it. They speared him right there on the mudflats. They took his body to a hidden spot in the jungle. They followed the ancestral ritual. They removed his head, consumed his brain, and cooked his flesh. Every part of Michael was used. His leg bones were turned into daggers, his ribs into spearheads, The Rockefeller name, the millions, the political power, it all vanished into the belly of the jungle. The debt was paid. The spirits of the 5 leaders were finally at rest. Why did the Dutch government hide this? Because in 1961, they were in a PR war with Indonesia. They were trying to prove to the UN that the Asmat were no longer headhunters. If they admitted the son of the American vice president had been eaten on their watch, they would lose the island. They told the priests to stay quiet. They told the patrol officers to burn their reports. But you can't burn a story. The Asmat began to suffer almost immediately. A cholera outbreak hit the village weeks later. To them, it was the Rockefeller curse. They became so terrified of the white spirits returning for revenge that they buried Michael's remains even deeper and swore a blood oath never to speak of it to an outsider. Before we close this chapter, we have to talk about the 1969 footage. 8 years after he vanished, a film crew was shooting a tribal ceremony. In one frame, for just a second, a man appears in a canoe. He is white, he is tall, he has a beard. He is naked, painted in ritual ash, and rowing with the exact same rhythm as the Asmat warriors. They call him Big Michael. The theory? That the tribe didn't eat him, that they saw him as a god and initiated him. That Michael Rockefeller, the man who hated the sophistication of New York, finally found a place where he could just be a man. It's a beautiful thought. The Hollywood ending. But in a world of blood debts and ancient laws, the truth is usually much colder. Michael Rockefeller went to New Guinea to find primitive art. He found a civilization far more disciplined and law-abiding than he realized. It just wasn't his law. He died because of a gunshot fired by a man he never met, at a tribe he hadn't yet visited, for a colony he didn't represent. That is the butterfly effect. That is the blood debt. The Rockefellers still have their oil, their museums, and their billions. But the Asmat? They have the story of the day they ate a king to set the world right. In the jungle, the ledger always balances in the end. Thanks for watching. If you think Michael is still out there among the trees, let me know in the comments. If not, well, maybe some things are better left in the shadows.